Nia DaCosta's new film Hedda, based on Henrik Ibsen's Hedda Gabler, opened a few days ago in theaters and will be out on Prime Video later this week. Well, it's occurred to me that so many people don't know anything about Hedda Gabler. And when I searched YouTube for resources on the play, all I could find were a production from the 1960s starring Ingrid Bergman as Hedda and a few interviews with actors and directors, which is ludicrous because this is one of the most performed plays in the world. Every year there's a new production popping up somewhere in a different language with different sets, actors, time periods. Hedda is a character almost every actress wants to play because of her complexity, and actresses everywhere in the world do. Cate Blanchett in Australia, Ruth Wilson and Lily Allen in England, Mary Louise Parker did on Broadway, and even Nina Hoss, who is in the new movie as Eileen Lovborg, the female counterpart to the original Eilert Lovborg, played Hedda on stage in Berlin in 2013. So welcome back to the channel. We're talking about Hedda Gabler. Before we get into the play, let's talk a little bit about the guy who wrote it, because he is very interesting. Henrik Ibsen was a Norwegian playwright, often referred to as the father of modern drama and theatrical realism, because before him, theater was dominated by melodrama, which was easy, cheap to produce, and predictable. Even Ibsen experimented with this genre, but mostly to criticize it, removing the fourth wall to make audiences voyeurs in his characters' lives. Not in a let's observe the Kardashians, they're so wacky and different kind of way, but in a let's observe the people next door, and I guarantee you, just because it's human nature, they're not boring or ordinary kind of way. Before Hedda Gabler, Ibsen had already written a bunch of plays, including A Doll's House, which is his most famous play, arguably, Ghosts, and The Wild Duck, which is also arguably his best. And our guy had a great relationship with scandal for critiquing 19th century society. Almost everything he wrote made people hyperventilate at first. Ibsen was revolutionary because he wrote women like they had never been written before. The most famous example is Nora in A Doll's House, who decides to leave her husband and children when she feels like she's too contained. This was unheard of. It was a gasp moment in European theater. By the time Hedda Gabler opened in 1890 in Munich, Ibsen's name was already being linked to the great philosophers of his time, Kierkegaard, Schopenhauer, and the play is often viewed through a Nietzschean lens for its exploration of existentialism, individualism, repression, desire, and sexism. So let's get into it. But first, subscribe, like this video, and don't forget at the end to start a conversation in the comments. If my eyes are darting back and forth, it's because I'm reading my script off a teleprompter. The story begins with Hedda and her new husband, George Tesman, returning from a 6-month honeymoon. And George Tesman is a mediocre academic who spent the entire trip obsessing over his research. When Thea Elstad arrives at their home, she reveals that she's fled her husband to find Eilert Lovborg, a brilliant but unstable writer and former tutor to her stepchildren. And he just so happens to also be a former flame of Hedda's and a current competitor of George's for a professorship. Thea tells them that he's been sober, that he has turned his life around, and that he has written a brilliant best-selling book. So Hedda, already disillusioned with domestic life, seizes the opportunity to create some drama. She manipulates Thea into confessing her feelings for Eilert, then provokes him into drinking again, sabotaging his reputation and rekindling his self-destruction at a party thrown by their friend Judge Brack. On his way back home from the party, George finds Eilert's lost manuscript for his next book, a groundbreaking work co-written with Thea's help. But before he can return it, Hedda burns it in an act driven by her desire to, quote, shape a human destiny. Eilert, unaware that Hedda destroyed the manuscript, becomes hopeless, and when he visits her, instead of telling him what she had done and talking him down, she gives him one of her father's pistols and urges him to die, quote, beautifully. When the news comes that he has shot himself, Hedda romanticizes his death as a noble act until Judge Brack reveals that his shooting was anything but beautiful. He died in a brothel from an accidental gunshot wound to the crotch. Judge Brack also reveals that he knows that the gun was Hedda's, and he begins to blackmail her, leaving her trapped and powerless. As Tesman and Thea work to reconstruct the lost manuscript in an attempt to preserve Eilert's legacy, Hedda realizes she's no longer the conductor of the chaos. And unable to face a life without control, she shoots herself, reclaiming through death the autonomy denied to her in life. All right, let's all take a moment because this Hedda is an extremely difficult character to sympathize with, but she's fascinating because of her contradictions. She oscillates between pride and horror, cruelty and compassion, bravery and cowardice. She's both destructive and deeply unwell, which makes you ache for her, even as you cringe. She's a sort of Sylvia Plath character. The destructive need for control, the conflict between freedom and confinement, the feminine rebellion, the way she aesthecizes death and views men as mirrors rather than partners. Ruth Wilson even read Sylvia Plath's diaries to prepare for the role. What really highlights Hedda's complexity is the complete lack of complexity of the men around her. It's one of the few pieces of theater where the men are all one-dimensional, and that is a brilliant, deliberate choice. They each represent one aspect of Hedda's personality. Tesman is mediocrity. He represents the dullness of domestic life, which she will now forever be trapped in. Eilert is brilliance without discipline. He's her self-destruction. He's the genius who can't get out of his own way. And Judge Brack is the establishment, respectable on the surface, corrupt underneath, and he understands her better than anyone else. Now we know that Nia DaCosta has changed the genders of some of the male characters, so it'll be interesting to see how that affects the dynamic. But I digress. Hedda cares deeply about her social standing. As an aristocratic woman in the 19th century, her choices were limited to marriage, spinsterhood, or scandal. There wasn't a fourth choice. She couldn't get a job or go make her own way like Nora from A Doll's House. She married Tesman largely for the security of a stable bourgeois position, a nice house, social respectability, and financial comfort. She didn't love him, but he was controllable, and at 29, she was running out of options. Tesman is mediocre but stable, whereas Eilert, although brilliant, is decadent and dissolute, too unstable for Hedda's obsession with appearances. Yet, that is the very thing she admires about him, and she resents Thea for taming him. She wants the wildness, not the well-adjusted sobriety, because Hedda is unable to live meaningfully herself. She used to live vicariously through Eilert, and now she does by disrupting other people's lives. Not to be funny or provocative, but to destroy their stability for entertainment. She loves being the conductor of the chaos orchestra, but not a participant. Her measure of wealth is control. She feels poor when she can't control others. She envies Thea's control over Eilert, even though she can easily manipulate Tesman, but his mediocrity makes him worthless in her eyes. Tesman is a bore. He's a spoiled man-child who absolutely can't do without his housekeeper Berta, and whose aunt borrows heavily to give him his bride of his dreams. Everyone in the play is bending over backwards to accommodate Tesman's selfish choices to marry and keep Hedda, without even having a secure job or any money. It's all about him. Even their honeymoon, you could argue, was really for his research for this stupid book about the most boring subject you could fathom. Domestic industries of Brabant during the Middle Ages. Yawn. He would probably be one of the worst husbands you could have, precisely because pointing out little flaws like snitching on her to his aunt and insisting she's filled out in front of people outing her possible pregnancy would be a stupid thing to complain about, but something that would drive every woman friggin' bonkers. So even though Hedda behaves like an ass a lot of the time, it's really hard to feel sorry for George, who is one of those people who may not appear to be obviously harmful because he's so dull and uninspiring on some level, but his desperation leads him to have questionable and very entitled feelings. He says things like, they can't possibly give the professorship to Eilert because that wouldn't be considerate of my state as a married man, as if getting married automatically earns him a job. Eilert, meanwhile, is the complete opposite. He steps aside from the competition graciously, seeing no need to humiliate George because he's so much smarter. Clearly, Hedda and I agree that Eilert is the superior guy here, although I still find him a little too suggestible to be brilliant. But she thinks so highly of him and even imagines him with vine leaves in his hair, which is a callback to the Greek god of wine, revelry, fertility, ritual madness, and theater. Very on brand. which, side note, is a good place to mention that this isn't the only reference to Greek tragedies. Some other things are the triangulation relationships and the traditional end to a Greek tragedy where the wrong or bad or difficult person dies at the end. But again, I digress. As the play nears the end, Hedda becomes full-blown nuts. She's speaking her insane thoughts out loud, she's dreaming of a beautiful death for Eilert, and she is barely hiding how unhinged she really is. Until she hears how Eilert actually died. When he doesn't commit the aesthetic death that she wanted, she becomes irate because she becomes so aware that she is actually not at all in control of everyone's fate. She cannot accept that her actions have no meaning. And on top of it, Thea, whose relationship with Eilert Hedda both envied and despised, is now forming a similar relationship with Hedda's husband George. It throws Hedda off and makes her question the meaning of her existence. She tries with everything she can to hold on to her conductor status by refusing to lie about giving Eilert the gun, but it's when Judge Brack starts to blackmail her that she goes over the edge and commits suicide. That to her is the one thing of which she can be in control. She finally becomes a full participant, and still she isn't able to make it, for lack of a better word, beautiful, like she wanted Eilert's death to be. It's marred by blackmail and failure. I'll stop here. I think this gives you a basic understanding of the play that you can go into the movie with. The play has endured so much because you walk away with a lot of questions and many things to discuss. And that is why I am excited, although we all know I do not like different versions of already very good works of art. I am excited to see Nia DaCosta's Hedda, and I am open to the changes she makes. I love this cast, and I think it's interesting that she decided to change the time period, the races, and the genders. I'm excited to watch it, and maybe I'll report back. So, see you next time.